Hey everyone, Ripley with Bob's Watches. I'm here with Justin for another episode of Watch Talk. Also, if you haven't done so already, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can stay up to date on our latest video content. Emily's out today, but we've got 5 excellent watches, so we're here for another episode of Watch Talk. Before we get into it, wrist check. Justin, what are you wearing?
Today, I'm going with the Breitling Transocean. I love a good chronograph. This one's simple. I think it's a really nice watch.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite modern Breitlings.
Yeah, it's really clean.
Yeah, really good looking.
What do you got on today?
I'm wearing the Tudor Black Bay GMT.
Good choice.
And on the fabric strap, because it is pretty hot out here today.
It looks nice. I love the way that it matches with the
just
bezel.
coming off 4th of July, figured it was still the mood.
Yeah,
so
it's a good combo.
So I guess let's get into it.
Sure.
We've got 5 watches. They're all pretty modern, all released in the post-2000s era.
Mm-hmm. Let's start with one of my favorites. I'll bring it in. This is a beauty, right? The Patek Philippe.
Yeah, reference 5711. I don't know if there's a hotter / more controversial watch right now. I mean, obviously it's immensely hot, recently discontinued, although kind of in its swan song stage, available with the green dial, but no longer available with white or blue. The 5711, it's by no means the first Nautilus. The first one came out in '76. The 5711 didn't come around until 2006. And then the white dial version was only produced from 2012 until it was discontinued earlier this year. So it technically is quite a bit rarer than the blue one.
It is rare. And the blue is, that's the Nautilus that you expect. That's the classic look. But personally, I think the white dial is the best. That's my favorite dial out of all of these watches.
Yeah, I used to be a fan of the blue, and the blue is...
blue's great.
The blue's great, but it's also existed since the mid-'70s, whereas this, it is kind of like, it's an overused expression, but a fresh take on a classic.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I love how they did the black finished hands and the black outline markers, and the fact that the date disc is white as well, I think really makes for a more cohesive look than the blue, which it's still white on that one, so it does stand out a bit more.
It does. And I think just with the the polished and the brushed stainless and kind of that very monochromatic look across the whole watch, I just think it's really clean, and I think the white dial is a really good choice on it.
Yeah, and I think there's no way to discuss this watch without talking about its open market value. This is a watch that wasn't extremely expensive when it was still in production, around 30 grand or so, but now it is trading hands for north of 6 figures for both the blue and the white dial.
Right.
And if you can get your hands on a green, for sure, it's right up there as well. And
we talk about a lot of watches that are trading over their market value, right? Like all new Rolex sport models, not even sport models, anything stainless, and they trade for slightly over their retail to double. This is kind of in a class all its own,
even
right?
A Daytona that's got 20, 30 grand. This has more than $40,000 if you were able to get a new one and flip it, So I think as far as investment potential, certainly it's there if you were able to get one at retail. But now it's sort of interesting because there's a cap on the number out there.
Sure.
And I don't think the Nautilus is going to become unpopular. So it'll be interesting to see what's going to happen with these models, and particularly the white dial, because it is, in my opinion, the most unique among them. Now that it's not in existence any longer, they're not getting easier to get, and as collectors might already have a blue dial version, what's the next Nautilus you hunt down for?
Yeah, absolutely. And this one, like you said, we don't see a lot of them. We see a lot of watches here, and we see a fair amount of blue dial 5711s, but I think this is like the second white one we've seen. So when you talk about terms of scarcity and rarity, like absolutely, just that one difference makes a pretty big difference in how many we see when we see hundreds of watches a week.
Yeah, and speaking about small differences making a drastically different impact, I think our second watch is sort of the epitome of that. The Rolex Day-Date President is hardly a watch that's unfamiliar to people. I mean, it's something that's just been a cornerstone offering in the brand since 1956.
Right.
But this one isn't your standard President. Solid platinum. It's the 228206, so the 40 millimeter model. And it's one of those things where you see the Rolex case, you see the President bracelet, it's all really instantly recognizable design cues, and it's got a smooth bezel, which starts to hint at its platinum before you even get to the ice blue dial.
Yes. Yeah, there's no mistaking this one, right? When I see it, I mean, because Rolex offers the ice blue dial exclusively on platinum watches.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as soon as you see this one, it's a gorgeous color, right? Like, I love that ice blue dial. That's one of my favorites. And you instantly know that, it's on a platinum watch and it's on something nice.
Same. I think it's a beautiful color. It's also one of those kind of in-the-know things where those who know it's platinum. Those who don't, could mistake it for steel at a glance. But this is a bunch of little insider cues that this watch is something special. You have the President bracelet. It's only ever done in gold or platinum.
Right.
You have the day-date, which itself is, confined to precious metals. So you already know it's going to be something, but the fact that it has a smooth bezel and a nice blue dial lets you know it is without a doubt platinum.
Yeah.
The smooth bezel, you see it on steel watches, but the reason this doesn't have a fluted bezel is because Rolex only does that fluted bezel in gold. So you'll see it in white gold, you'll see it in yellow gold, rose gold, but not platinum. So for the platinum ones, it's going to be either gem set or smooth. And so I think it kind of gives it a bolder, almost more modern look. You might mistake it for a date just if it had a fluted bezel.
It's a little bit unique too in terms of day dates. You see fluted bezels all the time. So to see something that has the smooth bezel on you, it kind of throws you for a little bit of a loop. It looks a little bit date justy, but it's definitely not a date just. So I think that's part of its charm, is that uniqueness of those differences where it doesn't look like every other day date that Rolex does.
Yeah, and I think this iteration compared to the Day-Date 2 with its 41mm case, I think this is a drastic improvement. Yes, it's a bit smaller, but in terms of the overall, just how it feels on the wrist, it's quite a bit more refined, just the way the bracelet meshes.
Yeah.
If I was choosing a larger Day-Date model, the Day-Date 40 would be my pick over the Day-Date 2 any day.
Absolutely. What do you think about the diamond pattern on the dial? That's something that's more recent from Rolex as well?
Yeah, I really like it. I think Rolex does dial textures well. In the old days, they had like linen, tapestry, and on the new ones, they've got these kind of laser adorned patterns. So this kind of diagonal motif is one of them. You'll also see a quadrant pattern in addition to, kind of a vertical stripe. But I think it adds a lot of dimension and also showcases the color a bit more. Instead of just being one metallic finish, you kind of get two different textures showcasing that really dynamic blue color, and I think it looks great.
I do too. I love that. The first time I saw it was actually on the chocolate dial version, and I fell in love. It was the first time I'd seen it, and the pattern, it adds just enough, like you said, it changes light, because the dial still has like the sunburst characteristic of it, where you see the beautiful lights and darks and transition, and this kind of just adds one more little dimension of the way the light hits it and to see some different colors. So yeah, all of those dials from Rolex I've been a huge fan of, and I think this one's no different. The ice blue's gorgeous, and the pattern makes it even better.
Yeah, and continuing with the topic of killer dials, I think Grand Seiko is probably one of the names that comes to most people's mind when you think of dials that punch so far above their weight class. A lot of Grand Seiko's designs are inspired by nature, and particularly the surrounding area in Japan. This is the SBGJ 201 high beat GMT, so it's stainless steel. It's not a spring driver, 9F quartz or anything. It's a traditional mechanical movement, GMT, so it's got a jumping hand.
Incredibly accurate, right?
Yeah, and the dial is inspired by Mount Iwate in the snow. So Mount Iwate is winter, the texture, kind of that white. And it's really hard to see, but when you get it up close, it's kind of magical.
It is. And like you said, Grand Seiko is no stranger to fantastic dials. This one's no different. I love a lot of stuff they do. This one's very reminiscent of the Snowflake, which I'm a huge fan of. I'm sure you and a lot of people are, right? That's kind of one of their headliners. I like that this one's reminiscent of the Snowflake, but it's really subtle in comparison, right? Like you said, you almost don't even notice it. From across the room and across the table, you probably don't even notice the texture on it, but you see it out in the sunlight, and you get some good light on there and you can see the texture of it. And it just has this kind of radial pattern coming out. Like you said, it's like you're looking down on a mountaintop from space, I guess. And it just has this very, very subtle texture over the whole thing, and it's just so beautiful.
Yeah, I think the comparison to the Snowflake is a really appropriate one. They're almost like two opposite sides of the coin. One's steel, one's titanium, one's spring drive, one is high beat mechanical, one's a 3-hand, one's a GMT. They're very different on paper, but at the same time, as far as their overall color profile, this white kind of snow-inspired dial, light blue accents, Zaratsu polished case, granted slightly different case shapes and all of that. I think for two watches that have very little on paper in common, I think this is probably a direct competitor for the Snowflake, and I wouldn't be surprised if there were a good number of people kind of debating between these two watches.
Absolutely, and that's some credit to Seiko for keeping those. It's nice to have them be different, but also in the same family, I guess you could say, right? Like you can tell that they're similar, and a lot of the same design went into both of them, and they look close and they look related, which I like.
Yeah, they do, and like all Grand Seikos, what you get on the movement side is just expertly done as well. And on this one of my favorite features is that you can actually see the movement unobstructed. So often they put an emblem or some decoration in there,
Right.
but one of the things that makes Grand Seiko, in my opinion, so much more special than their Seiko counterparts is that level of finishing. And you don't just get it on the dial here, you get it on the movement as well.
Sure.
And of course, looking over on the dial side, you get expertly done hands, expertly done markers, dial texture, everything's beautiful.
Like everything Grand Seiko, right? I mean, fit and finish is superb. The texture and finish on the dial is
Even
amazing.
The polish, the Zeratsu polishing that can only be done in Japan and all of that. It is special. It is special.
I love the overall look and feel of this watch. We talk about it's inspired by like the snow and the mountain, everything from the subtle texture on the dial, but the fact that the dial's white and there's blue accents and then there's the polish and brush parts of the bracelet, it really lends to that winter feel, that winter styling, and without being over the top, I think it's expertly done.
Yeah, and it is a really kind of everyday watch. It's steel, so you don't need to be worried about precious metals. It's not absurdly expensive to the point where you're running around with a six-figure watch or more on your wrist, but it's got a screw-down crown, water resistant to 100 meters. It's really versatile as far as it's got that grammar of design influenced case, so it's dressy, but at the same time it's angular and kind of preserves a bit of sporty. Right. This is a great contender as a go anywhere, do anything, like one watch collection.
Exactly. It has like the GMT function, but it's not, it's not really in your face. It's
not
kind of
like
subtle.
A sports watch.
Exactly,
GMT.
right.
Yeah,
so you could, if you're going the sport way, you can style it that way. If you're trying to go a little dressier, like it blends into, whereas the Tudor, that's not really blending into a dress situation. This one you could easily get away with.
And I'm sure this will look fantastic on a wide number of straps as well.
Absolutely, that's always a plus. Well, this one is very white and monochromatic. Let's take a little contrast and see this.
Also a stunning dial, but in a very different direction.
Different way.
So this is the new 36 millimeter Oyster Perpetual, so the one that was just released last year in 2020, the 126000. And then this is obviously the yellow dial one. So I think this probably along with the the turquoise are probably like the two hottest ones.
Yeah.
And of course in the 36 and 41 millimeter size are the two most popular.
A lot of attention to the yellow.
Yeah, a lot of attention to the yellow, and I think part of that is the watch that this sort of is loosely inspired by is the white gold vintage Rolex President with the yellow Stella.
Yes.
And that watch is like $200,000 minimum if you're able to find one. So I think this being a modern watch in steel and significantly more affordable than the vintage Stella counterpart has a lot of people excited.
Yeah.
Plus, it came out in September 2020, which is unusual because of COVID and there not being a Basel World or any in-person show like that. But an interesting thing about it is the Pantone colors of 2020 they had two, gray and yellow, and I think this perfectly embraces
pretty appropriate.
it. Yeah. And I think it's a great looking watch.
It is. It's very fun. It's very, I want to say loud without being loud, right? It's a good mix of it's bright, it's fun, it's very springtime, but it's also really simple and refined. And I love the black accents on the hour markers, the outside of the hour markers all the way around. And Rolex they kind of do contrasting colors depending on the dial color, but that's a great touch. I mean, yellow and black is such a great color combination, and they've added just enough black to kind of make it interesting, and I think it's a fun watch without being kind of over the top.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see yellow used in like a not overtly like aggro sporty way.
Yeah.
Like it's really easy to go yellow and go full on like racing inspired, or you see some like really, really sporty like DLC coated Breitlings. But it's yellow kind of more in a lighter sort of playful manner. It's not your go anywhere, do anything one watch collection, but I think that's exactly the point. This is one of Rolex's most affordable offerings at a retail level, but granted, it's trading between 2 and 3 times for the yellow 36 model on the open market. But
at retail, it's very attainable, and it doesn't have to be your only watch. It's something that you can kind of add to your collection without necessarily breaking the bank.
It's the perfect like second or third Rolex.
Yeah.
You have a silver dial, blue dial, black dial, what have you. This is a great one to add that isn't going to break the bank, add something definitively different, and at the same time, if you want a pop of color, well, there's a pop.
Yeah, absolutely. So all of this line has been pretty popular. We've talked about how hot they've all been. Do you see that continuing?
For the OPs, yeah, I think so. It's a lot. People want a Rolex, period.
Right.
So the more affordable options are going to be popular in general.
And in the past, the more affordable options, like the OPs, were rather simple: silver dial, black dial, white dial,
and they were easy to get.
So this is the same watch, same price category, but it's kind of elevated. Right now, it's something fun, and now it's something different. And I think that adds a lot of desirability to it.
Yeah, there isn't an older Rolex watch that looks like it, unless you get to the vintage Stellas, and then we're talking about a totally different type of watch as well. So I can see the popularity continuing, and if they do make this a fleeting, fun color batch and discontinued after several years, of course prices are going to go through the roof like anything on that. All these watches we've talked about so far have been pretty popular, but I think our fifth one is the opposite of what was popular upon its release.
Now, this is definitely something different, right?
Yeah.
I mean, right off the bat, you can tell that this is not something that Rolex always does. So we're talking about the Rolex Cellini Prince, right? It's nicknamed the doctor's watch.
Yeah. Well, this kind of whole style of this rectangular watch with the hours and minutes up on one dial and a large prominent seconds hand was called a doctor's watch because way back in the day, it made it easy for medical professionals to keep track of seconds while they took a patient's pulse.
Which makes sense.
Obviously, none of that's used today. Pulsation scales and all that came far later, but the nickname sort of stuck. Rolex was making these watches back in the 1920s and 30s, but think pre-Oyster case days. And so it is a design that has its lineage deep in the early days of the brand, but obviously isn't something that the brand did a lot of.
Right.
By the end of the 40s, these designs had pretty much all but disappeared. And then in 2005, they came back with these. There were 4 of them, all different. 2 in white gold, 1 in yellow gold, 1 in ever rose gold, which is what we've got here.
And they're very different, right? We say they're different. It's not different like there's a different dial color like we had just talked about the Oyster Perpetuals, right? And that's one thing that I really like about this one. It's very different. The cases look different.
Everything
the dials look different. The material is different. I mean, they all have the same rectangular case shape.
But not the same case. That's the interesting part. These little grooves here, just the decoration on the side, they're all slightly different.
So aside from the dial layout and the overall case shape, which remains consistent, they're very different watches, which I think is really cool because they're they're part of this collection. Which usually we see a collection like we said, it's got different colored dials. Not on this one. Everything is different.
Everything's different. I would love to own all 4 of these one day.
It would be a great collection.
I mean, 4 gold Rolexes, it's expensive, but I'd love to own all 4 just because when you're able to hold them side by side and compare them and contrast them, it's fascinating. One, the crystal's not flat, so if you can see here, it's curved. The whole watch itself is curved, and that's already something you don't see. It has a clear case back and a manual wind movement, chronometer certified, something you also don't see. And something that's unique, in addition to all the cases being different, the dials are all different, and they feature a engraved guilloche pattern that is mirrored and complemented on the bridges of the movement. So you'll see this radial pattern coming out from the balance wheel here. That same pattern is mirrored on the dial side, branching out from the running seconds. And it's like this on all 4 of these doctor's watches, where the engraving on the movement bridges mirrors that on the dial side.
It's a nice touch. And it's something we don't see a lot with Rolex. I think for the sheer fact of, like we said, Rolex doesn't do a lot of display casebacks. I mean,
hardly ever. No,
I would
virtually
say
none.
never, but almost never.
Like the only modern watch. Yeah.
So it's nice that they've kind of leaned in all the way, and I mean, it's Rolex. You expect the best. So the fact that they have included a display back and to kind of mirror that texture is a nice touch and some nice attention to detail. It's a decorated
Rolex movement. That's not something they do. Rolex makes very, very good movements, but they're not known for the superfluous decorations.
Sure.
And this, obviously, it's visible. It's also probably the first Rolex movement to use Paraflex shock absorbers, which is interesting to put on a dress watch first. But
and there's a lot to see. It's a hand wind movement, right?
Yeah.
So when you look through the window, there's a lot going on there, and there's a lot of detail. And
it's not an Oyster case, something to point out. So you don't have the same 100 meters plus water resistance that you're going to find on these other models here. No screw down crown. No screw in case back, but this is a dress watch. It was paired with a leather strap. This is not meant to be your watch to go jump in the pool with.
Yeah, I have no problems with them foregoing the Oyster case on this one bit.
No, not at all. And I think if you're talking about just unique Rolex watches, this one has a lot of weird quirks, but it's also, I think, a good looking watch. So yes, it's special on paper, but if I, was going to a nice event, was putting on a suit, I'd be totally down to wear that.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I feel
a great
like
watch.
this watch is very divisive. People either seem to really like it or not like it at all. I'm part of the group that really likes it. I think it's really different, which gets some points for me because of the uniqueness of it. I like the Art Deco styling. It kind of brings it back to the early days, of when they were originally offered, and it's just not something you see every day. And I think it's a great watch.
Yeah, I can't see this being something Rolex would make today. And when you think about 2005 wasn't that long ago, I feel like this was sort of the last of the Cellini being a little weird. Because if you look at the current lineup, it's very consistent. It's sort of much more in that classically styled umbrella. But
I like a little weird.
For me, absolutely. Yeah. I think weird Cellinis are great.
Yeah.
And if you're looking for a rectangular watch, you can go Cartier. That's sort of the expected. But you can also do a Reverso. That's
sure.
But I think if you want to stay within the Rolex umbrella, oh, come on, choose one of these. It's it's fantastic.
Absolutely.
And I love the Art Deco styling. It's a great watch, but all 5 of these are great watches, so it's probably time to choose which one you're going to take.
I would take any of them, but...
Yeah, I'll take any of them, too.
Are we choosing?
Yeah, so unlimited budget, you got to keep it. What's it going to be?
Okay, well, it seems like every week I'm very tempted by several of these offerings. I'm going to go with the Rolex Day-Date. I'm not a huge dress watch person. I usually go to sport before dress, but every once in a while one comes up like this Rolex Day-Date with the ice blue dial that just knocks it out of the park for me. I think it's so clean. I love the platinum. I love everything about it, and yeah, I will have no problem wearing this all the time.
For me, that one's a close second.
Okay, good. I'm glad.
I'm really close to choosing it, and I think the Cellini Prince deserves the honorable mention for just that'd be the one I'd be most excited to show off at like a Red Bar meetup. But for me, oh come on, you're not going to choose the 5711, right? Like and specifically because it's the white dial. I would not have chosen this if it was the blue dial because I would assume everyone would think I was just jumping on the hype bandwagon.
Sure.
But I think choosing this in the white dial, it's an intentional choice. You'd obviously spent a considerable sum, and you went for this one.
Absolutely. I agree. And that one was, a very close second for me. I think I like the Rolex a little bit better as a whole, but like I said, I think that white dial is the best Patek Philippe there is, and it was a tough choice.
Yeah, and your whole watch is made out of platinum. On this one, I'd be remiss if we didn't just show off that on the 5711, the rotor is 22 karat gold. So yes, it's steel, but we're not totally without some lovely precious metals.
Sure.
So that about wraps up for this episode of Watch Talk. You know which watches we're picking, but we want to know which ones you are, so be sure to tell us in the comments below. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe, and until next episode, we'll see you next time.